In this chapter we will cover the analog settings of the VPFlowScope M. Each transmitter has an analog output which can be used as a 4 to 20 milliamp output to read out either flow, pressure or temperature. The second option would be to use it as a pulse output, and the third option is to use it as an alarm, which we will cover in a different chapter. The analog output will allow you to read out VPFlowScope M data remotely through an energy monitoring system or a BMS. In this chapter we will cover how to set the 4 to 20 milliamp output, how to set the pulse output, and how to change these settings. Let's talk about the 4 to 20 milliamp settings. The analog settings of the flow meter are set by default to 0 to 100% of the flow range in normalized meter per second. You can change the unit and the range to your liking without influencing the measurement. As explained, the 4 to 20 milliamp output can be used for flow or pressure or temperature. You can also change the measurement and again the units to your liking by using the table here below in this chapter. Let's talk about the range. 4 to 20 milliamp. 4 representing the 0, meaning the lowest end of the range. 20 milliamp representing the span, meaning the highest end of the range. You can also change the setting of the range to your liking. If you set the range smaller, you will get a higher resolution on the total 4 to 20 milliamp scale. As you know, the sensor measures bidirectional. So you can also set your 4 to 20 milliamp settings either in one directional or bidirectional option. We will give you a few examples how to do this. The first example is one directional measurement. I set my 4 milliamps to 0 meters normalized per second, and I set my 20 milliamps to plus 150 meter normalized per second. In this case, my 12 milliamp becomes plus 75 meters normalized per second. The second example is bidirectional measurement. In this case, I set my 4 milliamp to minus 150, and I set my 20 milliamp to plus 150. In this case, 12 milliamp becomes 0. The third example is the partial bidirectional measurement. In this case, I only want to determine if I have negative flow. I set my 4 milliamps to minus 1, and I set my 20 milliamp to plus 150. The analog setting can be used as a pulse output. The pulse is a non-potential free output as it acts as an active current loop. You can make it passive by using an external third-party isolator. The pulse is set as a volume interval, for example, once per cubic meter, once per 2 cubic meters. The shortest possible pulse frequency is once per 2 seconds. So in case you set your interval too small, you will see a constant pulse output of 20 milliamp. In that case, please adjust your volume interval accordingly. The pulse output is directly linked to the internal totalizer of the flow meter. So, in case of a negative flow, the totalizer will count backwards, but it will not generate a pulse, simply because a negative pulse is not possible. A pulse will only be given again if the same amount of positive flow has been added to the totalizer to make up for that negative flow. Only then the pulse will again be generated if your volume interval has been passed again. So we have taken a look at the 4 to 20 milliamp settings and the pulse output settings. Now we would like to take a closer look at how to change these settings for your specific application. We know that all VP flow meters come with an analog output as a standard. We now would like to show you how to actually set the functionality of your analog output. We press Menu, we press Settings, and we go to analog output. Confirm by pressing enter, and I can now actually change the mode of my analog output. How do I want to use my analog output? I have three options. I want to use it as a standard 4 to 20 milliamp output. I want to use it as a pulse output, or I want to use it as an alarm output. We are going to set the mode. Let's go to pulse settings first. In the pulse settings menu, I can choose my unit, either cubic meters or standard cubic feet. Press enter to confirm, and I actually set the size of the pulse. Let's say 40. After 40 cubic meters, I get a pulse output. Press enter to save, and my pulse settings are saved. Suppose I have set my analog output mode as a 4 to 20 milliamp signal. Then I go to 4 to 20 milliamp settings, and I actually change the settings of my 4 to 20 milliamp. I choose the unit, press enter to confirm, and I set my 0 to span. Let's say between 20 and 200. I now have saved the settings of my 4 to 20 milliamp output. As you can see in the analog output menu settings, there is no option to set an alarm. That is done through a different menu, which we will show you later on. Now let's look at the analog output mode settings. We go to the settings menu, and I'm going to set my analog output as an alarm, for example. Now I press submit, and my analog output is saved as an alarm. If I now want to change it to a 4 to 20 milliamp output, I select 4 to 20 milliamp, and a menu to set my 0 and span plus the unit appears. It is now set at 25 cubes per hour as my 0. I can change it to 30 if I want. And I change my span to, let's say, 230. The unit can be chosen as well, to your liking. In this case, we stick to cubes per hour. We press submit, and now it has been saved. The last option is to use the analog output as a pulse. In that case, I can choose my unit again, cubes or standard cubic feet, and I can actually set my pulse size. For example, 3. I press submit again, and it has been set. So this is the way to change your analog output.